This video is actually going to be kind of a fun video to make. As you can see, this Mooney is having a few issues. It's kind of a unique situation because it did technically have a gear up landing, kind of, and I'll explain a little bit more about what really happened with that situation. But the prop did hit the runway. What that means is when you have a prop strike, that means we're gonna have to open it up and go through it, make sure the crank is good. You know, the pin on the back needs to be replaced. You got to make sure the flange is good. The whole thing, go through the whole engine and then put it back together and then obviously put it back on. But that's what this video is going to be about. Let's get after it. Let's talk about what happened with this airplane. From my understanding, the pilot was flying back here to Watford City and noticed that he was losing, started losing power. Knowing that, I believe he started to turn off, some of the things that were using power, like radios or whatever it was in the aircraft that wasn't significant at that time. The reason you do that is because once you get back here, this gear is a powered gear, so you need to have as much battery as you can to get to engage the landing gear and get the landing gear down and locked. Once he got here, he tried to extend the landing gear and there was not enough power to bring it down. I believe it got down about halfway, and obviously that wasn't enough to get it down and engaged and locked and get the green lights on. So I believe what he ended up doing is just flying northwest of town here and then manually getting it the rest of the way. On the side of this airplane, on the pilot side, there's a little crank. You crank it down and then to get it down and locked. As he was doing that, he felt like he had it down and locked in the lock position. What he did then is he called a buddy of his to come out to the airport, and he did a couple passes around the airport while his buddy on the ground, visually inspected and made sure that the gear was down. At that time, it looked like the gear was completely down, and he decided that he was going to make the attempt to land. Well, he came in, everything was fine, landed just fine, taxied about halfway down the runway, and then all of a sudden, the gear collapsed underneath him. Slammed on the runway, obviously the prop hit, and so that's why everything is bent up. The underside of the aircraft is actually in not too bad of shape, but as you guys know, when that happens, the engine's got to come off. There's no way around it. All right, so we've already gotten the nose cone off of here, and so the next step in this whole process is we got to get this cowling off. All right, so now that we got the top cowling and the sides off, I think the next thing we're gonna do before we attack this prop is just get these spark plugs out of here, and then that way, it's a lot easier to move and we won't have a mishap of accidentally firing or something like that, so. All right, so we got all the spark plugs out. The next step of this process is to get this bottom cowling off of here. This top part here is actually in with the engine here. And it's separated here, so you can kind of see that. So this goes with the engine, this part is gonna be separate. But with this cowling that I'm noticing is that like the oil cooler is mounted to the cowling itself. Obviously the air filter is as well. And then we have the light housing is also part of it. So I think what I'm gonna have to do, just get in here, start disconnecting the oil lines and things like that, get this thing off of here, and then I think we can start attacking the prop. All right, so looking in here, looks like we have this connection here we got to take off. Probably take it off that top part right there. Looking in there, I don't know if you guys can see that. This is that air inlet right here. I might have to take it off right here and get that detached from the bottom parts. Then it looks like everything is good on this side. Coming over here, this is that oil cooler I was talking about. That'll have to come off, so I'll have to take that line off, plug that, and then this line down here. Disconnect these cowl flaps right here. And then I think that whole thing will come off. right, so I got the hoses off of this oil cooler here. Got those off, got them all capped off. And I noticed, if you look in here, let me show you. So if you look in here, this is the oil cooler. And then if you look back here, this is the cable for the alternate air. And then this is the whole alternate air channel here that also needs to come off. I think what I'm gonna do, and there's only 4 bolts to hold this in, I think I'm just gonna get this out of the way so I can have access to all of this, so I can get in there a lot easier, and that'll really clean things up. And to do that, it looks like all it is it's got these 4 bolts here. Once I get these 4 bolts out of here, then I should just be able to remove this and just get it out of the way so I can access the control arm for this alternate door right here. All right, so as you guys can see, let me focus in on that. That really opens things up in here and allows me to get in here and get this bracket off, and then get this off, and then get this whole plate section here off as well. Then we'll just move on to the other side, see what we got over there. All right, so I think I got everything all disconnected on this this bottom cowling here. I got it held up with this strap here for now, but I think if I move this out of the way, take that off, we should be good to go. Not quite. There's a couple of hoses that I've seen on the backside of the cowling here that looks like I can just pull them off, and then they're just drain tubes or whatever. So I'll pull those off and we'll try this again. Let me show you what it was. So if you can see in here, right here, these 2 drain tubes, that one was connected here, this one was connected here, that one was connected here, and that should be it. Let's try that again. Okay, just gotta remove this. Should be held up there just like that. All right, that's it. Not too bad. That really opens things up as far as getting access to this engine. You know, it's gonna make it a lot easier to get the exhaust off, the intake tubes, get on the backside of this engine, and like, you know, the air tubes, the oil lines, fuel lines, all of that stuff is gonna be a lot easier to get access to. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna move on to this prop and get the prop off. The first thing I'm gonna do is try to get this belt off. I might have to loosen up the alternator. Normally you have to do that to loosen up that belt and get that belt off. And then we'll go ahead and cut these safety wires, start loosening this thing up and getting it off. So one unique thing about this airplane is that the alternator comes through this like this little bit of this like shroud or wall or whatever you want to call it. So you have to come in through here, and then we'll have to cut this safety wire here and then loosen that up. And then that's on a track, so you'll be able to pull this up, and then that will loosen the belt so we can get the belt off. Now that we got the belt off, and you see how that's loose now? There's a track here, and it just goes on that track. But now that we got the belt loose, we're gonna start taking the nuts off. You know, with this prop, obviously there's safety wire, and that's a bundle of joy to do if you've never done it before. But we'll go ahead and cut these off. There should be 6 of them, all the way around like this. And then you just want to, you know, you want to back them out a little at a time, because obviously you can't just take the nut off. And if you look on the other side in here, it just screws into a plate right here. It's kind of hard to see, I know, but it just screws into the back of this plate. So what you need to do is we'll put some kind of support on here, and then we'll just back this out slowly, and then we can just pull the prop off itself. The first thing that I'm gonna do is go through and get all the safety wire cut and all the safety wire out of there. And then I'll grab we have like the hoist that has some straps on it that I'm gonna use, and we'll just strap it here, have that hoist here, and then we'll just start backing these out and then pulling the prop off. right, so we brought the engine hoist over. I got the prop strapped up here. Got a little bit of tension on there, and I believe I got this good enough to where, you know, it's gonna hold the prop. So now what we gotta do is we just gotta take these nuts and just basically slowly back out a little at a time. You know, just do one up here, one down here, till it gets close enough to where it just wants to separate from the engine here. All right, so the next thing on the list is I'm gonna go ahead and start taking this baffling off. When I'm done with that, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the exhaust and kind of get that out of the way so we can really open this thing up and see what it is that we need to take apart or take off to get this thing off of the airframe. But actually, before I do that, I still need to drain the oil in this thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that going, get the oil draining, and then I'm gonna start working on the baffling here. So let's get moving. We're going into day 2 of this project here. We didn't quite get as far as we wanted to yesterday or last night, but I think today, if we have a pretty good day, we should be able to get this engine off and put on the stand. All we really have left to do is disconnect some of these fuel lines back here, some of the cables. I'm gonna go ahead and get this exhaust off. It's just gonna get it out of the way so we can access get underneath it and, you know, make sure that we have all of the lines disconnected and whatnot. And then what we'll do is we'll bring the stand over here. We'll get hooked up right here with the cable. And then with this aircraft, what we'll probably have to do is put a tail stand underneath it, maybe some bags on the wings to keep that CG forward far enough so that it doesn't tip up when we take the engine off. That's what we're gonna be doing today. And hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have this thing pretty well wrapped up. So that pretty much wraps up this side of the engine. It looks like I got all the hoses off, all the cables off, the fuel lines are off, the lines, the power lines going to the starter, all those cables have been disconnected, and this is pretty much ready to go. So all I need to do is jump over to the other side, disconnect the alternator, a few hoses over there, and I think we're ready to get this thing off the airframe. All right, so I think all I gotta do now is just remove this bracket right here from the bottom of the oil pan, and I think she's ready to come off. Of course, I'll go through and make sure and double check everything, but I think she's ready to go. We got everything disconnected. I believe we got everything disconnected on this engine, and we're ready to take it off the airframe. How we're gonna do that is we have our engine hoist here, and we have this cable. And there's a reason we like using the cable, and I'll show you here in a little bit. But we have our cable disconnected, or we have our cable connected, and then all we need to do now is just add a little tension to it, and then we're gonna start taking the bolts off of the engine mounts. Once that's done, then we'll start pulling this engine forward to get it off the airframe. Now, this engine weighs 300 pounds, and so when you take the engine off the airframe, obviously it's gonna shift the CG of the aircraft to the back, which means that the aircraft is gonna wanna tip up like this. To prevent that, what we're gonna do is we have some sandbags, We put a 50-pound sandbag here. On each wing, we have 50-pound sandbags. So 100 here, 100 there, 50 there. And then what we also did, just to make sure that it's not going to tip, is we have a stand on the tail right back there. And then once we get the engine off, we'll kind of configure and see where the CG is, see how much weight, you know, make sure it's forward far enough. That way we can possibly remove that stand back there and then move the aircraft around. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, so I think what we need to do now is we need to talk about, you know, ADs and what ADs are, service bulletins, and why it was that we had to take that engine completely off of the aircraft. But before we do that, I think what we need to do is we need to figure out, you know, what is the definition of a prop strike, or what constitutes a propeller strike? Is hitting a blade of grass, is that a prop strike? Or the hangar door, what if the hangar door fell and hit your prop and just nicked the end of it? Is that a prop strike? Or what if you hit a puddle of water? Is that a prop strike? Or, you know, obviously if your gear collapses and you know, your engine's spinning and your prop hits the runway, clearly that classifies as a prop strike. But, you know, what is the definition? What are the guidelines that constitutes a propeller strike where you have to take action? Well, the FAA actually has an AD out on this, and it gives us the definition of what they constitute a propeller strike to be. And what this is this is actually AD 2004-10-14, which is the AD that we're going to be following, you know, because of the incident that we had. And this AD is for most Lycoming engines. So their definition of a propeller strike, and I'm going to go through this, and I think there's 3 or 4 parts to this. And the first part is any incident, whether or not the engine is operating, that requires repair to the propeller other than minor dressing of the blades. And the second part of this is, and I'm just reading this off of this AD here. So any incident during the engine operation in which the propeller impacts a solid object that causes a drop in RPMs and requires structural repair to the propellers. And they're not, and it has in parentheses, and they're not talking about like touch-up paint or anything like that. And this is not restricted to prop strikes against the ground. So that's the second part of their definition. And then it goes on to the third part. A sudden drop in RPM while impacting water, tall grass, or similar yielding medium where propeller damage is not normally incurred. So there's where the tall grass is and impacting water and all of that stuff in this AD. But the last part of this says, the preceding definition includes situations where an aircraft is stationary and the landing gear collapses, causing one or more blades to be substantially bent, or where the hangar door or any other object strikes the propeller blade. These cases should be handled as a sudden stoppage because of the potential severe side loading on the crankshaft flange, front bearing, and seal. Knowing what the definition of a prop strike is, and obviously that engine that I was working on and that aircraft that I was working on falls into this category. So now what? There's going to be a whole list of things that you're going to need to do. And keep in mind that this is the absolute bare minimum required by the FAA to get this engine, you know, back into airworthy condition and back on your airplane. Now, Lycoming has put out a service bulletin that's a supplemental guide to what you need to do and the steps that you need to take to comply with this. And what that is actually Service Bulletin 475C. And in that Service Bulletin, there's going to be, you know, there's going to be a few things that you're going to need to do, which is the whole reason we had to take that engine off. And I'll give you guys kind of a quick rundown of what's all in there. But basically what it is you got to open up the accessory case, which is on the back side of the engine, which is where your magnetos and all of your stuff mount to. You gotta remove all that stuff, take the cover off, and underneath that cover, you're gonna find a bunch of gears and stuff. So what they want you to do is you gotta remove that. There's a bolt, there's a crankshaft bolt in a locking plate. You gotta take that bolt out, take the locking plate off, disregard that because you have to replace that with a new one. You can't reuse that one. Take the gears off, clean the gears, inspect the gears, and inspect and replace if necessary the dowel pin that's in there. So, and in that service bulletin, it gives us, you know, a rundown of the steps to take and what to look for, and, you know, the tolerances and all that. So that's the guide that we follow when complying with this AD. Now, knowing that, 𝐬𝐲𝐽 also has another service bulletin that they put out. It's actually a mandatory service bulletin that is not required by Part 91. But here's the thing about this service bulletin, and what this service bulletin is it's a lot more in depth, and it requires you to crack the engine open, and there's a whole list of things that need to be checked and gone through, you know, to make this engine a lot more safe, and to make sure that there's nothing going on internally inside the engine. And here's the thing about that, you know, you don't have to comply with it. At least Part 91s don't have to comply with this service bulletin, but it's going to be, you're going to find that it's going to be very challenging to find a mechanic that is only going to comply with just that AD 2004-10-14 and not go through, or not going to want to go through the whole 𝐬𝐲𝐽 service bulletin, which is actually service bulletin 533C, the one that I'm talking about, that has all of the other items that, you know, that need to be gone through to make sure that this engine is going to be safe. Because an A&P is going to need to sign off that engine, and that A&P is going to want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to happen to that engine 10 years down the road or whatever, and they put their name on that, not knowing what's going on inside that engine. So I think that you're going to have a hard time finding an A&P who's just going to go and do the minimum and send it on its way. Not only that, but your insurance is going to want you to comply with this service bulletin also. So I don't know if even if you did, you know, just do the minimum, I don't even know if they're going to, or what your insurance is going to say as far as getting insurance, you know, after that, not complying with 533C. So that's why we have decided to take this engine off and send it out to a repair station and have not only the AD done, but also 533C. We're going to have the thing split open by people who have done this 1,000 times, because we don't have the tooling or the knowledge in this shop to do that as of right now. So we just took it off, and we're going to have it sent out, and then they're going to go through the whole thing, complying with all of this stuff, brought back to the shop, and then we're just going to put it back on, sign it off, and send it on its way. So hopefully you guys learned something in this video, because what I really try to do here, and hopefully I covered everything, but what I really try to do is show people out there, or give some kind of guidance on, you know, what really needs to happen with your engine, and what the engine has to go through, and what the mechanics have to go through to get your engine to comply with all of the ADs and service bulletins, and get your engine back on your aircraft so that you can fly it again safely. And so hopefully I covered everything. Hopefully you learned something. And obviously, if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and I'm just going to keep making videos for you. So we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.